or small leaf. The size is judged according to the second or third leaf growing just above the roots of new branches. If it's less than 14 square centimeters, it's classified as a small leaf. Between 14 and 28 square centimeters, it's a medium leaf. And from 28 to 50 square centimeters, it's a broad leaf. The small leaves tend to be crisp and hard, while the broad ones are thick and soft. Broad leaves need to be soaked for longer than smaller ones because they contain more effective substances such as polyphenols and caffeine. This also explains their mellower flavor. For many centuries, tea farmers have been improving their tea processing. They've learned to control the degree of fermentation through the techniques and timing of their processing in order to improve the tea's ultimate flavor. The degree of fermentation is dependent on the size of the leaves. The broader the leaf, the higher the degree of fermentation needs to be. Puer tea is made from broad leaves that are even thicker than normal broad leaves. The taste is a little bitter even after full fermentation. This requires aging to take place after the fermentation. Therefore, it's called post-fermented tea. The aged flavor of Puer tea is a masterpiece jointly created by nature and the tea growers.
普洱茶它含有的维生素的含量是非常的高，那么至少有2点是得到人们的公认，一个它是喝普洱茶的人普遍血压不高，喝普洱茶的人普遍血脂不高。从这点来看，那么我认为呢，普洱茶从现在的人最科学的说，它就是给你补充维生素。
The middle and lower reaches of the Lanchang River are the origin and distribution center of Puer tea. The natural conditions are ideal for the growth of the tea trees. The annual temperature averages 17 to 22 degrees Celsius, and the climate is subtropical. The region contains areas of vastly differing altitudes and receives plenty of sun and rain, so it's ideal for tea trees to thrive. Tall, old trees can be seen almost everywhere. The town of Yiwu on the Lanchang River in Mengla County is at the heart of the tea production here, that of Puer tea in particular. The Qingming Festival falls around April 5th every year. It marks the beginning of spring, when the weather grows warmer and the world revives from the winter cold. It's at this time that the tea trees produce the first new leaves of the year, which are rich in nutrition and flavor. The leaves picked at this time are best for producing high-quality Puer tea.
Ya ni na cho no la te phe ye ta yo we la ra ho ma ye tu na la te phe. Strict standards are observed in the picking process to guarantee the quality of the Puer tea. 5 criteria have been established regarding when and where the leaves can be picked, namely days, hours, mountains, trees, and branches. Because the standards are so strict, only a few leaves are suitable. Even after the leaves are picked, a significant proportion will fail to qualify. Leaves that are too small, too old, too thin, or too light in color
will be discarded. Generally speaking, only 30% of leaves that have been picked can survive this step. The observance of such strict criteria is essential to the success of the following and more important step, the fermentation, because leaves that fail to meet the criteria can have an adverse influence on the fermentation. Puer tea used to be fermented on horseback. In the past, the journey from Yunnan either to the capital or to Tibet took 3 months. This accounted for most of the 110 days of fermentation. Before the leaves were taken away, the growers would spray spring water on them and stir them evenly. This would make them soft and save them from being crushed during the journey. It would also accelerate the fermentation process. After 12 days being carried on horseback, the tea would arrive in Kunming. By then it would have turned slightly red, indicating that the primary fermentation was complete. In Kunming, the tea would be steamed and pressed into cakes, and then wrapped into leaves. The leaves are a local speciality which become very soft after being soaked in spring water. As soon as it was packed, the Puer tea was sent straight to the capital. The journey generally took 70 to 80 days. During the long journey, and despite the dry air, the water in the broad leaves and the leaves wrapping the tea ensured that the fermentation proceeded slowly. By the time the Puer tea reached the capital, it would have finished its fermentation and be ready to drink. The tea growers, with their long experience, could not only guarantee the quality of the tribute tea, but also ensure that full use was made of the journey to ensure that the Puer tea arrived at its destination on time and in the best possible condition. The fermentation of Puer tea demands a perfect mix of water, moisture, and air. The combination of the water, the oxygen in the air, and the temperature provides the conditions for the development of microbes and, accordingly, the fermentation. The fermentation of broadleaf Puer tea produces a substance called theoflavin, often called the soft gold of tea. Its pharmacological merits have been widely recognized. Clinical experiments show that it can reduce blood fat and prevent cardiovascular disease. In the human body, by mixing with the cholesterol in the intestines, it reduces cholesterol absorption from food and discourages cholesterol synthesis. Besides, the lengthy fermentation makes the Puer tea mild and has a warming effect on the stomach. Scientists once conducted an experiment on 2 groups of mice. They fed one group with ordinary food and the other group with food rich in cholesterol. Yunnan Puer tea was added to all the food. A blood analysis 9 weeks later showed that blood fat was reduced by 10% in the first group of mice and 30% in the second. Analysis showed that this was because Puer tea contains numerous microbes which accelerate the metabolism and balance and discourage cholesterol when dissolved in water. Furthermore, it's also the fermentation that gives Puer tea its pleasant flavor. Since the fermentation of Puer tea is a continuous process, the tea can be stored for long periods, more than a century in some cases, without losing its flavor. There's a well-known saying concerning Puer tea: "Grandpa grows, grandson drinks." In fact, it's the local ethnic custom to pick new tea, drink old tea. These days, the time taken to transport the Puer tea has been considerably reduced. However, there can be no reduction in the period of fermentation. So, instead, The fermentation takes place in storage.